All right, welcome to The Explainer. That Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight, it was way more than just a boxing match, right? It was really a masterclass in storytelling. So today, we're going to break down the whole narrative that was so carefully built for all of us watching, both what happened inside the ring and, maybe more importantly, outside of it.
You hear that? A murderous puncher? I mean, wow, that's the kind of super dramatic language that was all over the broadcast. And look, words like that, they're not just describing what's happening. No, they're building something much bigger, a very specific story. So the real question is, what exactly was that story? And how did they put it all together? And that's really the heart of what we're getting into today. We're going to dig into the commentary, the specific words they chose, even the post-fight interviews. Basically, peel back all the layers to see the bigger picture. We want to understand the intentional storytelling that was happening right in front of us.
Now, to do this right, we're not just throwing out opinions here. We're actually using a proper research framework, a structured content analysis to be specific. And full credit where it's due, this is based on the work of Dr. Ronnie Rodas. This framework is going to let us break down exactly how this whole media event was framed and help us answer some really key questions about how the broadcast built its entire story. Okay, you ready? Let's dive in.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First up, we'll look at the big idea, a clash of worlds. Then, we'll get into how they framed legitimacy to create this credibility gap. After that, we're going to zoom in on the specific language they used to describe the performance. And of course, we have to talk about how the narrative got crafted after the fight. And we'll wrap it all up by asking the big question. Was this more about entertainment or a real breakdown of the sport?
Okay, first things first, we have to understand the main conflict, the thing that framed the entire broadcast. See, this wasn't sold to us as just another boxing match. Oh no, this was a clash of worlds. You had the social media influencer on one side and the elite, traditional heavyweight champion on the other. A classic David versus Goliath setup, but for the modern age.
So, to really get how they presented this clash, we need to talk about a key concept, narrative framing. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It's just the process of picking and choosing certain parts of an event to highlight, all to push you toward one particular way of thinking about it. So put simply, every single comment, every replay they showed, every question they asked, it was all chosen specifically to shape how you, the viewer, saw the
So how did they actually do it? How was this framing put into practice? Well, it all started by creating what you could call a credibility gap. Right from the opening bell, the language the commentators used built this clear hierarchy, this sense of who was legit and who wasn't.
Okay, now check this out. This is where it gets really interesting, when you put the language side by side. For Jake Paul, the whole story is about survival. His goal? Just do not get knocked out. His approach? He's working his way in. But for Joshua, it's all about pure, utter dominance. He's a murderous puncher who uncorks the catapult right. See the difference? It immediately creates this huge power imbalance in your mind before a punch even really lands.
All right, so when it came to the actual action, what ideas were they hammering home over and over again? To figure that out, we actually went through and analyzed the commentary to see which themes about their performance popped up the most.
And boom, this chart tells the story perfectly. Just look at that. The commentary was almost all about raw power. That was the #1 thing. Then coming in second was experience, framing Joshua as the seasoned pro. But what's really telling is what's at the bottom. See how little they talked about actual technical skill or tactics? The story they wanted to tell was super simple. It was all about raw power versus a plucky challenger.
And what about the style of the commentary? Like, what was the vibe? Well, this chart makes it pretty clear. The biggest piece of the pie by far was just hype and promotion, getting you pumped up for the spectacle. The next biggest chunk was admiration for the fighters, their toughness, their power. But look at that tiny little sliver right there. That's the serious analysis. It was barely a part of the conversation at all.
But listen, the storytelling didn't just stop when the fight was over. Nope. In fact, you could argue one of the best narrative performances came after the final bell. I'm talking about Jake Paul's post-fight interview, where he took a really clear loss and just started to completely reframe it, all on his own terms. It was kind of brilliant, actually. And you can see his whole process right here on this timeline. It's like a 4-step playbook. Step 1, humility. He admits, I got my ass beat, right? But then step 2, he immediately reframes it. I've already won in life. Then comes step 3, the justification. My jaw is broken. I got tired. Reasons that soften the blow of the loss. And finally, the pivot to the future, the comeback story. I'm going to come back and get a world championship belt. Just like that, a definitive loss becomes just another chapter in his hero's journey.
So what's the big takeaway here?
When you put all these pieces together, the language they use, the themes they focused on, that post-fight spin, what was the final score? How much of this was about the spectacle, and how much was actually about the sport?
Well, the final number is pretty staggering. Our analysis found that about 90% of the commentary was focused on storylines, hype, and the spectacle, not on the technical analysis of boxing. The vast majority of it was pure entertainment.
And that really leaves us with a big question to chew on, right? In this new era of sports, where influencers are the main characters and the narrative can be shaped and controlled long after the final bell, it makes you wonder, which victory actually matters more? The one that happens inside the ropes or the story that gets told to the rest of the world?